You're listening to the Chelsey Holm podcast, where high-functioning Christian women come to lay down performance, pick up presents, and finally come home to who God created them to be. I'm Chelsey, the wife coach, mindset trainer, and your guide back to God-first living, soul-deep peace, and restored connection in your marriage, your motherhood, and identity. If you've been holding it all together on the outside while unraveling on the inside, you're in the right place. Let's breathe deep and begin. Have you ever bought something at the grocery store that you knew didn't really align with the way that you were eating? Maybe it was junk food, processed food, or like your favorite snack, and you were like, well, I'll just have a little bit at a time. And so you get it. You put it in your cart, you get it home, and then you find that you've eaten it in 30 seconds, probably before the night's even over, right? Like we've all been there. I know I've been there. And that's why we take the policy that we have in our house that we don't buy it, so then we don't consume it. And, it sometimes means that we're really boring. But this episode is not about nutrition, wellness, or minimizing our processed food intake, even though those are very important topics that I am super passionate about, having, I think at this point, 11 or 12 years in the wellness space. And, but we're talking about marriage and relationships. And so how does it relate? Well, let me tell you. Okay. So one of the biggest culprits of divorce is when divorce is an option on the table. So it's as if you pick up the option at the store and you put it in your cupboard and like, well, I'm not going to have it. Like, we're not going to go that route. But as long as it's there, as long as it's lingering, even if you've mentally said we're not going to, your brain still sees it as a door and a way out. And so you can't actually fully commit. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice that I don't even know how, maybe it was just by the grace of God at the time. I don't remember anyone really telling us that we should, but Zach and I we took that option off the table. We burned our boats and we're like, we're going to figure this out. We're going to make this work. We're not going to leave. We're always going to be here. And we're going to move in the same direction. And when we start pulling in opposite directions, we're going to recalibrate and we're going to continue moving in the same direction, right? But so often I see this struggle happening because it's like you've got your feet in two different places and you can't do that, right? Like it's like serving two masters. You can't say that you're fully committed while also keeping divorce on the table, because if it's always there, it's always going to be lingering over your shoulder. And it's always going to be that, well, maybe, like, it's still an option. Um, it's still always going to be that case. And you've got to take it off the table. Like, you just have to. Like, you have to burn the boats and say divorce is not an option. The only option here is to make this work. And we can, be roommates and live life side by side, but not one. Or we can be committed to figuring this out, living by God's design, and walking in oneness. But at the end of the day, it's a choice, and you get to make that choice. But as long as you're keeping divorce in the pantry, you're always going to have that shadow hanging over your shoulder. And you can't fully commit. You can say that you fully commit, but you don't actually fully commit. And I'm telling you this from my own experience walking in our marriage, from me witnessing other people, especially couples that I haven't worked with one-on-one, but I've been like friends with or acquaintances with, that as long as divorce stayed on the table, at the end of the day, the pain was going to outweigh the commitment to stay and make it work. And they're always going to take the path of least resistance at the end of the day. Like, that's what we do as humans. And I've seen it more often than not. Also one other detrimental thing. So it's detrimental to your marriage to keep divorce on the table. It just is. You can't fully commit until it's off the table, and it's not an option, and it will never be an option again, right? It's not a power tool to hold against each other. It's not a victim tactic to be like, well, fine, like shut down, run away, close off, all of those things. Like, it's not something we hold over each other's head. It's not something we joke about. It's not something that is helpful. But the other thing that is not helpful is who you hang around with. Because I've also seen this many times that, unless you have people in your corner who are for your marriage and for doing marriage God's way, they're not going to speak life into it, and they're going to agree with you, and they're going to allow complaint, and they're going to encourage you to do whatever you feel like and follow your heart, and if you're not happy, go find that somewhere else. But you're not going to find that somewhere else, because you're the common denominator that's going to go into other relationships, and you're just going to take the same baggage and the same problems that you haven't worked through in this marriage. And that's the way that it goes. I've seen this time and time again. So divorce can't be on the table. Who's in your circle matters. They need to be for your marriage. They need to be someone that encourages you to make it work and to surrender, and also who will challenge you when you're bringing your complaints. Who's going to say, hey, you know, this isn't a space for you to complain, right? You can bring your challenges and we can talk through them, and I can hold up that mirror so that you can look at what needs to change in me. Where do I need to grow? But this is not a free for all bashing of complaint. And so often, women, I think men as well, but women, because I've been in these circles where the common theme is husband bashing and everyone can get behind it. And, another one is like talking bad about your kids or the struggles or how hard it is or whatever. And it's like, there was a point actually back when we were in Oshkosh, where I noticed this theme, and I just came to the realization. Like, I remember sitting in my backyard and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. Like, I'm not going to feed into this narrative anymore. I'm not going to complain about my husband to anyone, and I'm especially not going to allow other people to complain about their husband. And actually, so what I started doing, which I think annoyed the heck out of people who just wanted to complain, was I started saying, I'm sorry that that's where you guys are at and you're frustrated with that. Like, I'm sorry you're feeling frustrated. My husband's great. He's not perfect, but we're committed to each other and we do life together and we're on mission together. Right. And people would get really annoyed by that. And that's okay. Those are people who want to stay where they're at and aren't willing to do the inner work to create awareness, because without awareness, we can't change anything. We can't change what we're not aware of. Right. And so these are just a couple things that I see more often than not. So having divorce on the table, not like your community isn't encouraging you or pouring life into you. And also your community becomes a circle of complaint where everyone is in agreement, right? Or husband bashing or whatever that looks like. So these are like some big problems that are totally common practice and socially acceptable. But if you're someone who wants to have a godly marriage, doing marriage God's way, according to his design, these things have to become unacceptable and completely out of the picture. Again, burning the boats. You want people who are going to challenge you. You want people who are going to hold space for you and let you express your emotions, but are not going to allow you to fall into the trap of thinking that your emotions get to be dictators, because they're not. They're simply prompts to help you to go deeper at what's actually going on under the surface. Because in coaching, time and time again, when we have an overreaction to something, it's because not what actually transpired bothered us, but it's because it poked a deeper wound that we haven't dealt with, or it exposed a pattern that we have not broken yet and rewritten into something that's healthy and uplifting. And that's hard, right? It's hard to be challenged. It's hard to to sit with the fact that, wow, I was wrong. And to have that kind of humility of, okay, great, like this is where I'm at, like let's get moving. Like, if you're on a weight loss journey but you don't actually know how much you weigh, how are you going to know if you're even making progress? Like, how are you going to know if you haven't set goals for where you're going? How are you going to know? So often I see this in marriage, and we did this ourselves, that it's this like just getting by together. Like we're just getting by together. We're just moving through life together, bare minimum, kind of hanging on, coasting most of the time, but it's not intentional. And especially if we don't know where we're going, then how are we going to get there together? How are we going to get there at all, even individually? We're not. And so that's why, when husband and wife start pulling in opposite directions, usually wife is pulling in kids or work direction, and husband is pulling in work direction, right? We're going in opposite directions. We're not pulling in the same order, which is God, you, your spouse, your kids, and then your work and everything else. And it has to be God and then you, because God is our fulfillment. That's where the fulfillment comes from and pours over into us. And then we have to be second in this order, because it's about discipline and the practices that we're doing that allow the Holy Spirit to come in and move and fill us and then overflow onto our spouse, right? Because we can't pour from an empty cup. So we have to first be connected to the source and be surrendered to Him. And then we also have to be disciplined so that we are someone who is caring and being a good steward of what God has given us, which means our body, which means our mind, which means our spirit. And if we're not doing that, then it's going to be really challenging for us to show up as one with our husband or our kids. And if we're putting our kids before our husband, that is not going to create the environment either of how God designed marriage. And wives as the weaker vessel, not meaning that we're weak, but that we're supports, we're helpmates. And husbands were responsible and designed to lead the family. And unfortunately, we get this totally backwards, and we have women leading, and it's exhausting because God did not design us to do that. And we have men who are not leading and who feel totally disrespected, but they haven't actually stepped into the leadership that God created them for and become someone who is worthy of respect, right? And it goes both ways. And so this is going to be a challenging episode for you, yes, but you need to understand that if you don't know where you're at, if you guys have these things lingering in your marriage, like hiding in the marriage pantry, if you will, then it's no wonder you haven't been able to fully commit, because you haven't burned the boats. You have to burn the boats. Don't even buy the junk. Don't bring it in the house. Don't allow it into your sacred space of oneness in marriage. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And remember, you do not have to become something else to be loved. You just have to return to who God already created you to be, deeply you. If this episode blessed you, share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It really does help other women find the hope and healing you just received. And don't forget, your marriage, your peace, and your joy, it's not too far gone. Nothing is too broken for God to redeem or restore. God's just getting started.